45 million travelers and nomads travel to Mexico every year, but I think millions of people are not only losing thousands of dollars each year, but they're probably not having the best experience they could because they don't know the 5 things that every digital nomad needs to know about Mexico. That not only is going to save you money, but also keeps you out of sticky situations that I might have found myself in back in 2022. Before we get to discussing the safety in Mexico, let's talk about something positive. Mexico is built for digital nomads. I think it is the friendliest country to tourists and digital nomads, and that's because the entire economy is built on digital nomads. They're even going to give you a passport if you have a baby in Mexico. That's right, that's because of this thing called birth tourism. There's about 10 to 20 countries around the world right now that actually offer passports and citizenship to not only newborns, but also the parents of that newborn child for simply having the child in the border. No, you don't have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for a citizenship. You just go and have a baby on a holiday in some of these countries like Mexico, Argentina, and Costa Rica, like we're going to cover today, and the country's just going to give you a citizenship. So obviously the rules and the regulations are slightly different from country to country, but in Mexico, if you have a baby in Mexico, the baby instantly gets Mexican citizenship, and the mum and the dad actually get instant permanent residency. That means you can live there, you don't have to worry about a 90-day or 180-day tourist visa like I always have to. You're an instant permanent resident, and then after 2 years, you get a citizenship. So that's one of the reasons why Mexico is such a popular digital nomad hotspot.
So it's your traveling Australian Bitcoin bogan checking in.
Another reason is because it was one of the only sane countries back in 2021. So what am I talking about? Well, I never left Australia until February 2022. I was 24 years old, I'd never traveled before in my life, and as soon as those international borders opened in Australia, I wanted to get on the first flight out of there. And I was looking for a new home. And guess what? There was one country that would accept me because of my medical status at the time, and that was Mexico. So Mexico was one of the first countries to open its borders during the 2020 and 2021 event that we all know all too much about. And I think it's because of the stance that Mexico took. This is another big contributing reason for why right now there's more than 45 million tourists and digital nomads cross the borders into Mexico every single year. And this is reflected really well in their numbers if we start comparing how much of the economy in Mexico comes from tourists. I saw these statistics and I did not believe them the first time I saw them, because we can see Mexico's percentage of the GDP that comes from tourism is 15%. Only 40 years ago, in the 1980s, Mexico was outside the top 10 most visited cities in the world. But in 2024, it was in the top 5, showing just how quickly things have changed for Mexico. Of all the money that's generated in Mexico each year, 15% of that comes from tourism. This is nearly the highest in the world. We can see other countries on this list, such as Thailand. They have 20% of their economy made up from tourism. And we can see this one actually surprised me. Bali. This is like the #1 hotspot for an Australian to go on their first holiday. That in Bali, only 12% of their economy is made up from tourism. And this is shocking because pretty much everyone in Bali speaks English because it caters to the tourists. And another interesting statistic on this list here is Costa Rica. Only 6% of their GDP is made up from tourism. That one was a little bit of a head scratcher to me, but I think one of the reasons for why Mexico is so popular as a digital nomad hotspot is because of the second thing that every traveler and nomad has to know about Mexico, and that is the food quality. So I've actually got a little bit of a controversial opinion on the food scene in Mexico. Before I trigger everybody with that opinion, let's start by looking at the positives and the statistics here. So I wanted to look at which countries in South America, Central America actually had Michelin star rated restaurants. And I was a little bit surprised at what I found. We can see Brazil tops this list of countries in South America and Central America with a Michelin star rated restaurant. They have 25 restaurants with a Michelin star. And that is great, don't get me wrong. But we've got Mexico coming in at number 2 here with 23 Michelin star rated restaurants. Now, a lot of people might be thinking, oh, so I should go to Brazil. Brazil's the place with the best restaurants, right? Well, I'm not so sure about that. Let's think about things on a per capita basis. I mean, we do know that in Brazil, there's about 210 million people. In Mexico, there's only 130 million. So there's about 80% more people, and subsequently, probably about 80% more restaurants in Brazil. So again, you could say yes, there's more Michelin star rated restaurants in Brazil, but on a per capita basis, you probably got more in Mexico. And again, before I get into the controversial opinions, some of the best food I've ever had, it's actually come from Mexico. So again, I've lived in Peru for maybe 8 or 9 months now in total. I treated it as kind of my home base in 2024 and early 2025. And Peru is known across the world for its ceviche. And I probably had maybe 20 to 30 courses of ceviche in those 9 to 10 months I was there. And I trigger every single Peruvian person I meet when I say this, but the best ceviche I ever had, it was actually in Tulum, in Mexico, in my first week of being outside of Australia. So I didn't even know what I didn't know when I first flew from Australia to Mexico, and I didn't even know I was in a 5-star restaurant when I was having this ceviche, but I was lucky enough to eat the ceviche of who I think is the best chef in the entire world. At the time, I didn't have a clue. I was in Vigilio Martinez's restaurant there in Tulum in Mexico, but apparently I was. I found this out literally only 6 months ago. And the ceviche in Tulum that I had at that restaurant was absolutely incredible. And Mexico does, don't get me wrong, have really good access to not only super high quality food, but some of the restaurants can put on a really good experience and also have super high quality food. Now, in saying that, I do think that maybe Mexico is slightly overrated. And before you throw daggers at me there, this is what I mean. I think the tacos and all the deep fried foods, it's good, don't get me wrong, but I just don't think it's that healthy. So when everybody says, oh, the food is super cheap in Mexico, it's incredible, it's the best in the world, I always like to ask them, what food are you talking about? Are you talking about steak at a restaurant? Or are you talking about the deep fried tacos and all of the other deep fried food that Mexico is well known for? And again, a lot of travelers and a lot of nomads are on a budget. So again, I think asking that question is really important. If you're asking me where the best steak restaurants are, it's probably Argentina, followed closely by somewhere like Peru, if we're talking about South America and Central America. Don't get me wrong, it's not bad. I just don't think it is the, 10 out of 10 that most nomads think it is. And again, I think I see a similar narrative forming around Bali. Everybody loves the Bali food. And obviously, when food costs $1 and you don't have a ton of money coming in income, naturally the food's probably going to taste a little bit better than it actually is. But that is probably a story for another day. The next thing I want to talk about in Mexico is its climate and its natural beauty, because Mexico is such a big country. Like we talked about a moment ago, there's 130 million people. And the country is absolutely massive. You have everything you need in Mexico. You have your big cities like Guadalajara or Mexico City, and you have so many coastal towns where you can live literally on the beach. Okay, so Mexico is also really well known for its nice and warm climate, pretty much year round. It's much closer to the equator than a lot of these other countries in Europe or North America that experience much more harsh swings in the weather with a very distinct summer and a very distinct winter. In Mexico, the winters are a lot more mild. Yes, it can still get hot in the summertime, but Mexico is a far more tropical climate. So again, great climate, another reason why digital nomads from places like Australia, Canada, or London are flocking to Mexico, because that climate is impeccable year round when you compare it to where we are coming from. Mexico is actually also home to a world wonder. Chichen Itza is a really cool pyramid. I went and visited that in 2022 and I absolutely loved it. I can still remember a tour guide who was like directing us to stand. Like, it was exactly 50 meters away from the pyramid, and he like clapped his hands, and you could hear the clap sound come through the pyramid that's like 50 meters away. I thought it was really interesting. If you are interested in the kind of out of the world experiences, I definitely encourage you guys to go and check out Chichen Itza. And the really cool thing about Mexico is you can go live on these beaches, and it's not going to cost you a fortune like it does in many other countries, because Mexico is so big. There's so much beach. Again, supply and demand. If you want to buy an apartment on the beach in Lima, in Peru, for example, well, Lima is a much smaller city. There's not a lot of beach, and you're fighting 15 million other Peruvians for that prime real estate spot. Mexico, it's completely different. It's massive. The whole country is pretty much a beach, okay? So again, cost of living in Mexico is really competitive worldwide. I jumped on over here on Satlantis, and I wanted to look at 3 of the major tourist and nomadic hotspots in Mexico. We've got Mexico City, Playa del Carmen, and Isla Mujeres, and we can see that all of these locations in Mexico, you can literally survive on between $2,500 and $3,500. And when you compare this to many of the other nomad-friendly hotspots in Europe, it's a wildly different story. You might have to pay double what you're paying in Mexico for the same experience. So this is again another reason why digital nomads are flocking to Mexico. Now, the final thing that I want to discuss about Mexico today is actually something that's stopping many people from going to Mexico. Whether that perception is true or not is another story. And this is actually the most important thing I think that every traveler and digital nomad needs to know about Mexico, and that is the safety. I've traveled to Mexico on over 6 or 7 different occasions. Again, I've been based in South America for 4 years since I escaped Australia in 2022. I've traveled to Mexico City, Cancun, Playa del Carmen, Tulum, Guadalajara, Mexico City multiple times, and even Acapulco. That is actually a little beach town in Mexico's most dangerous state, Guerrero. And I was even there at a time that crime was increasing. Now, in saying all of that, I think I have a pretty good grasp on what is the actual state of safety in Mexico. My opinions and my stories I might share with you might surprise you. So I actually can't even post this section of the video here on YouTube. So if you want to learn a little bit more about what the safety is actually like on the ground in Mexico, I've actually posted a little 3-minute video over on Satlantis, and I know that that video will not get taken down because that content cannot get taken down on that platform. So again, it is free. I highly encourage you guys to check out that little video that is linked down below in the description if you do want to learn a little bit more about what the safety is like in Mexico and just my overall thoughts on Mexico. I might summarize this video over there. So with all that said, thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was valuable. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below of Mexico. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I haven't been there yet in 2025, so maybe my information here is a little bit outdated. Let me know down below. I'll see you all in the next video.